Hey, how's it going? I am here today to wear my coaching hat to talk a little bit about the taper. I'm coaching a couple different athletes and a lot of them are racing this weekend, and I've seen that they have sort of been experiencing a little bit of what I'd call the taper tantrums, if you will. They didn't know what to expect for this period of time. So I'm going to tell you right now 7 different things that you can expect during taper for your big race. Now, I'm doing this in a sense of probably about a half marathon or marathon race or Olympic, half iron or Ironman distance triathlon race. So I'm talking about training that has included some level of volume within it, and that volume being reduced in the last week or 2 weeks before the race in order to prime you for race day. So here's what you can expect in your taper. Number 1 is a focus on nutrition. What should you change about your nutrition before your race? As little as possible. You should know what works for you by this point in your season. So hopefully when you had some long efforts or some race intensity simulation efforts, you've practiced what you're going to eat in the morning, you've practiced your nutrition the night before, maybe a long run or a long brick, and you know what's going to work for you. So the idea is to change as little as possible in that build-up for the race. Also, don't get too in your own head about your calorie intake or any weight gain that happens in this last week of training. I know as a finely tuned machine, one may be concerned about putting on an extra pound or 2, but when you up your carb intake, it's likely that you'll gain some water weight, and so you might see a little bit more of a fluctuation on the scale. I always recommend to my athletes not to weigh themselves in the last 2 to 3 weeks of training because I don't want them to overthink it. Don't forget to fuel as you were before. Just because your training load has been reduced doesn't mean that you should stop taking calories that are adequate for your activity level. So adjust accordingly. You don't need to eat as though you had a 5-hour ride that day. You need to make sure that you're maintaining your levels of fueling so that you are well prepared on race day. Number 2 is an urge to cram. I find that as soon as the taper starts in the last 2 weeks or week and a half, my athletes tend to want to add on extra sessions, extend the distance, or feel like they're not doing enough work. At this point, as they say, the hay is in the barn, right? The work is done. And between the last 10 days and race day, you're not going to make major gains in your fitness, in your speed, in your endurance, or anything else. That time is really about letting your body rest and recover. And so it's important not to try to cram extra time or extra effort or intensity into your sessions in that taper period. Number 3 is phantom pains. A lot of athletes start to get a lot of aches and pains in the taper period. I chalk this up to your body resting and recovering and everything getting set and prepared for race day. So it is not uncommon to reduce your training load, to start that taper period, to be resting more actually, and to feel awful. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's very common for runners and triathletes to get phantom knee pains or hip aches or ankle pains in that last period of time. If it's an actual pain, that's one thing, but just want to let you know that it is common for these little twinges of pain, these little aches to pop up in the final days before your race. Don't freak out about it. Now, obviously, I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on the internet. If it is a real pain, if it is a legitimate pain, don't push through it, consult a medical professional. That's my disclaimer. Number 4 is a pressure to perform. A lot of athletes in the last week before their race second guess their own goals and doubt the work that they've put in, and they doubt their fitness, they doubt their ability, and they doubt whether or not they can actually achieve the goals that they set forth and have been training for all season long. As somebody once told me, be careful what you say to yourself. You're always listening. I love that because it goes to show self-talk is really super important. If you've been training for a specific goal that was reasonable, you've been measuring it the entire time, if you've been working with a coach, you've been tracking your progress, there's no reason to second guess yourself in the days before a race. So every time you catch yourself having a negative thought, replace that with something positive, some positive visualization, some confidence boosting self-talk. So while it's super common to question your goals and to try to give yourself an out at the last minute, resist the urge to let yourself off the hook. This was a goal that was important enough for you to train for many weeks and usually many months, then it's important enough for you to try to achieve that on race day. Number 5, I guess, is just the general freak out. So not just freaking out about performance goals, but freaking out about every single thing in the taper period, about whether or not you're capable, how your weather will be, what the course is like, if your store is out of the nutrition product that you like, and just the general freak out, the high levels of tension that happen during taper. Anyone who lives with somebody who's tapering for a race can probably tell you more about this. A couple of things that you can do to ease the panic attacks. Visualization is a great tool, along with meditation, to get your mind right, to think more about how you want the race to go and how you think that you might feel in an ideal situation, as opposed to dwelling on the negative or freaking out or having a panic attack about it. Another thing that you can do during this period of time is to do your research. Look at the course, look at the elevation, look at the bike course, where the turns are. Inform yourself of where the aid stations are. Leaving your nutrition behind in transition is not that big of a deal if you know where the aid stations are at. So do the research in this period of time where you're starting to freak out to make yourself feel a little bit better. Number 6 is heavy legs. Whether you are training for a triathlon or for a running race, it is super common to have heavy legs, to feel like you have cement blocks for feet and tree trunks for legs in those final days before your race. It's important for you to allow yourself to rest during this time, to still be active and do some sharpening of the edges, but not to try to push yourself to test race pace or race effort before the big day. So while you'll feel kind of awful typically in the week before a race, in the day before, do a little shakeout run and start to feel good, and just think about channeling all of that energy for race day. The way that I like to think about it is that I'm reserving all of the energy that week to pull out on the big day. And so, I want to have a full reserve when I get to race day. So if I feel kind of horrible on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, which happens every single time that I race, I know that I'm going to feel badly, and I know that I'm just storing energy for the Saturday or Sunday race. And then number 7, the final thing that happens during taper is the taper blues. For a lot of people, this is what happens when you've been training for a specific day for 3 or 4 months, and the day is almost here. It's almost the anticipation of it being over. And while people might not think that, because by the time we get to taper, a lot of athletes are sick and tired of training. And even though training can feel like a real grind in the final weeks before a big race, it also is something that you've been doing and have incorporated in your life for the last 3 or 4 months, or even longer in some cases. And so there is a little bit of disappointment that happens. So it's very common for people to feel a little bit down, a little bit sad, a little bit angry, anxious, and all of these things. There you have it. Those are a few things for you to expect to happen when you are tapering for your big race. I'm making this specifically for a couple of my athletes, but if you find it helpful, please feel free to share. And good luck with whatever you are training for. See you next time.